Welcome. This lesson studies the King's Indian defense orthodox variation after White's f3 setup. We will compare Black's move 9 choices, then examine the critical c6 and d5 central break in detail. White plays d4, claiming central space and preparing c4 and e4. Black answers knight f6, attacking d5 while keeping the central structure flexible. White plays c4, increasing control over d5 and supporting the classical center. Black plays g6, preparing the bishop on g7 and the long diagonal. White develops knight c3, supporting the e4 advance and controlling d5. Black plays bishop g7. The bishop will pressure the center once the e-pawn moves. White plays e4 and establishes the broad pawn center that defines the King's Indian. Black plays d6, supporting the thematic e5 break without weakening the king. White develops knight f3, reinforcing the center and preparing to castle. Black castles kingside before challenging White's center. White plays bishop e2, choosing the classical development and keeping the position flexible. Black plays e5, directly challenging White's broad center. White castles kingside and brings the rook toward the center before the structure clarifies. Black takes on d4. This removes White's d-pawn and creates the tactical knight route to d4. White takes d4 with the knight. The knight is active, but Black can now challenge it with c6, knight c6, or knight bd7. Black plays rook e8, supporting the e-pawn and preparing the next central decision. White plays f3. The move supports e4 and prepares a strong center, but it also gives Black a clear target, strike before White can organize. At move 9, Black can develop with knight c6 or knight bd7, expand with a6, play the aggressive knight h5, or choose the most thematic move, c6. The point of c6 is to prepare d5 immediately and challenge White before the kingside attack begins. First, let's look at White's alternative on move 9, bishop f3 instead of pawn f3. The move is playable, but it gives Black a useful tempo against the bishop. Black plays knight bd7, preparing knight e5 and keeping the c-pawn available for the central break. White plays rook e1, but Black's knight route is already clear. Black plays knight e5, attacking the bishop on f3 and improving the knight at the same time. White returns the bishop to e2. The position remains approximately equal, but White has lost the chance to gain a clean development tempo. Now, let's look at another alternative on move 9 for Black, knight c6. Black develops and puts direct pressure on the knight and the central squares. White steps the knight back to c2. This is slightly unusual, but it keeps the center flexible and prepares bishop f4. Black moves the f6 knight to d7 and keeps the c-pawn available for a later central break. White plays bishop f4, developing actively and maintaining a small positional edge. Black moves the knight to c5. The position is playable for both sides, but White retains a small edge. Now, let's look at another alternative on move 9 for Black, knight bd7. This is solid, but it blocks the c-pawn and leaves the c8 bishop less active. White plays bishop g5 and makes the knight's central role more difficult. Black still prepares d5 with c6, but White has gained a tempo to organize. White connects the queen and bishop, preparing rook d1 and keeping a clear plan against the center. Black plays a5, but the move is a little slow. White keeps the more comfortable position with a small edge. Now, let's look at another alternative on move 9 for Black, a6. Black prepares b5 and controls b5 before White can use it. White develops bishop g5, making Black's extra queenside move feel less urgent. Black plays knight c6 and finally adds a piece to the central fight. White reorganizes the knight and keeps the position slightly better. Black has queenside space, but the move order costed tempo. Now, let's look at another alternative on move 9 for black, knight h5. This clears the g7 bishop's diagonal and prepares possible f5 play. White immediately gains space with g4 and asks the knight to decide where it belongs. The knight returns to f6. Black has lost time, and white keeps a small edge in space and development. White develops bishop e3 and keeps control of the central squares. Black develops knight c6, but white's space advantage remains. The position is playable, not equal by force. White connects the queen and bishop. The evaluation is a small white edge, while black must generate activity quickly. None of these move 9 alternatives loses immediately. They are sidelines because they either spend a tempo, block the c-pawn, or allow white to organize before the central break. Now, let's return to the main line. c6 is the most thematic choice because it challenges the center at once. Now, let's return to the main line with c6. Black supports the d5 break and takes control of the central dark squares. Before accepting the quiet king h1 move, white should compare the active candidates. Bishop e3 develops with tempo, and bishop g5 creates immediate tactical pressure. Those sidelines come first because they explain why king h1 is the practical mainline choice. Now, let's look at the first alternative on move 10 for white, bishop e3 instead of king h1. This keeps the central tension and prepares rook d1. Black plays d5 immediately. White must decide whether to exchange or keep the tension. White takes d5, forcing black to choose between the knight and the c-pawn. Black's knight takes d5, allowing white's knight to exchange it and then forcing the c-pawn to recapture. White takes d5 with the knight, removing black's active knight. Black takes d5 with the c-pawn. The resulting position is balanced and both sides have clear plans. White plays queen b3, targeting b7 and making black prove that the central break was sound. Black plays knight c6. The position is approximately equal, with white's activity balanced by black's central coordination. Now, let's look at another alternative in the bishop e3 branch. White again chooses bishop e3 before testing the other recapture order. Black plays d5 before white can improve the king. White takes d5 with the c-pawn. Black uses the c-pawn instead of the knight. This looks natural, but it allows white's knight to take d5 with a tactical point. White takes d5 with the knight. Black simply takes the knight with the other knight. This branch is winning for black, so the recapture order matters. Now, let's look at another alternative after queen b3. Black can take e4. White has enough activity, but must calculate the open files carefully. White places the rook on d1, immediately contesting the open file. Black plays queen e7, defending the center and preparing to develop the knight. White develops bishop c4 and keeps pressure on f7. Black plays knight c6, bringing the final piece into the battle. White takes e4 with the f-pawn and restores the material balance. Black plays knight e5, using the open center to improve the knight. White retreats bishop d5 and keeps pressure on the central files. Black plays bishop e6, asking white to decide whether to exchange. White takes e6 and reduces black's active bishop pair. Black recaptures with the f-pawn. The structure is balanced and the position remains close to equal. White plays h3, giving the king a useful escape square and preparing to improve the rook. Black plays a6. Both sides have chances, but neither has a lasting advantage. The main bishop e3 line is essentially equal. White has active pieces, but black's immediate d5 break solves the central problem before white can build a kingside attack. Now, let's look at the other alternative on move 10 for white, bishop g5 instead of king h1. The pin makes knight exchanges more favorable. Black plays queen b6, attacking b2 and making white solve a tactical problem before castling. White plays king h1 and keeps the queen and bishop coordinated. Black plays d5, entering the same central battle but with the queen already active on b6. White takes d5 with the c-pawn. Black takes d5 with the knight, attacking the center and inviting white to choose a knight exchange. White's knight from c3 takes d5, removing black's active knight. Black takes d5 with the c-pawn. White has a small edge from activity, but the position is sound for black. White moves the remaining knight to b5, eyeing c7 and putting pressure on the queen's side. Black plays knight c6. The position remains playable with a slight white edge. Now, let's look at another alternative on move 13, white takes with the e-pawn. This avoids the immediate knight exchange but leaves the center more open. Black's queen takes d4, removing the other white knight. White still has enough activity for a roughly equal position. Now, let's look at the tactical alternative on move 13, white takes d5 with the knight from c3, leaving the knight from d4 available for the tactical sequence. Black takes d4 with the queen. This is the tempting move in the notes, but white can force a winning simplification. White takes d4 with the queen, forcing black's bishop to recapture. Black's bishop takes d4. White has removed the queen and kept the remaining knight active. White jumps to c7. The knight attacks the rook and white emerges with a winning advantage. Bishop g5 creates the sharpest move order. The main knight exchange is close to equal with a small white edge. Taking on d5 with the e-pawn is also playable. But after knight takes d5, queen takes d4 is a tactical mistake because queen takes d4, bishop takes d4, and knight c7 leaves white winning. Now, let's return to the main line after comparing the move 10 alternatives. White plays king h1, stepping away from checks and keeping the rook and bishop coordination flexible. Black plays d5 immediately. This is the point of c6, black refuses to wait while white builds an attack. White takes on d5, opening the c-file and forcing black to decide how to recapture. Black recaptures with the c-pawn. The center is open, but black has active pieces and clear tactical resources. White plays bishop g5, pinning the knight and increasing the pressure on d5 and e7. Black answers knight c6, developing while adding another defender and attacker in the center. White plays bishop b5. The bishop supports the knight exchange on c6 and makes black solve the pin. Black plays h6, asking the bishop to decide while preparing to remove the pinned bishop. White takes c6 with the knight, removing black's active knight before the bishop is forced away. Black takes c6 with the b-pawn. Black accepts a damaged queenside structure in exchange for open lines and activity. White takes c6 with the bishop. The bishop attacks the rook on a8 and creates the tactical sequence that makes this line famous. Black takes g5 with the h-pawn. White has won the rook's route, but the bishop on c6 now has to escape. White takes a8. The material count favors white, but the bishop is deep in enemy territory and black has a dangerous passed pawn. Black pushes d4. This move attacks the knight on c3 and gives black immediate activity for the sacrificed exchange of pieces. White moves the knight to d5, keeping the extra material while avoiding the pawn's attack. Black plays bishop a6. The bishop enters the open diagonal and prepares pressure against the remaining white rook and bishop. White plays rook e1. The position is sharp but manageable, white has a slight edge, while black's activity is real. After rook e1, white is slightly better rather than winning outright. Black's next resource is queen takes a8, removing the trapped bishop. The lesson is that white's material gain comes with a coordination test, while black must use the passed d-pawn and active bishop before the position settles. White can instead move the bishop to c6. The bishop remains active and keeps the rook and queen under tactical pressure. Black plays rook e6, attacking the bishop route and preparing to meet the material imbalance with activity. White retreats to a4. The diagonal from a6 to f1 is now clear because the original e2 bishop traveled to b5 on move 13. Black's bishop travels from a6 through b5, c4, d3, and e2 to f1, capturing the white rook. White takes the bishop with the queen. Black must now choose between an active rook move and a tempting queen exchange. Black takes d5 with the knight, eliminating white's advanced piece and opening the way for the rook. White takes d5 with the e-pawn. The position is now a race between black's activity and white's extra material. At this moment black should keep the rook active. The natural-looking queen capture on d5 allows white's bishop to return with a decisive material advantage. Now, let's look at the active alternative after white's pawn recapture. Black plays rook e3, creating threats along the third rank and gaining the better practical chances. Now, let's look at the other alternative after white's pawn recapture. Black takes d5 with the queen, but white's bishop and queen coordinate against the exposed queen. White retreats bishop b3. The queen is exposed, and white's material advantage becomes decisive. The King's Indian Orthodox variation is a race between white's kingside space and black's central counterattack. At move 9, remember the practical choices: knight c6, knight b d7, a6, and knight h5 are playable sidelines, but c6 is the most principled. After c6, black should play d5 quickly. White's key plans are bishop g5, bishop e3, and the knight exchange on c6. Calculate the recaptures carefully, because one move order error can change an equal position into a win for either side. The notation must be kept separate. After 11 c takes d5, black's correct continuation is 12 knight takes d5. The c-pawn is no longer available for a second recapture. This is a concrete warning, not a harmless transposition.